And then we're just going to start our thread right on that hook shank. Once we have that secured in place, we can go ahead and bring in our moose body hair. You can use moose mane as well. Traditionally it was moose mane on this pattern. Moose body hair just seems to be a little bit easier to work with. You get a little bit more material out of it. So we're going to stack just a few fibers. I have 5 or 6 fibers there, stacked up, prepped, ready to be tied in, and then I'm just going to measure right about that hook shank, and we can transfer that in our hands to tie it in at the rear of the hook. Securing it in place right on top. You can always adjust slightly if you need to get the length you're looking for before you secure it nice and tight. And then we'll clip out our excess material here, and I like to use this as a measurement for where I'm going to end my body, just about 2/3 of the way up the hook shank. We'll secure that all down, clean everything up, and we can prepare to tie in our elk hair. You can use deer hair as well if you prefer it. There's a few different ways you can do this. I do it the traditional way, which some people find to be a little bit more difficult. There's a more modern way that Charlie Craven uses, but gives a great look as well. You get the same effect out of the pattern. So same thing, we took our elk hair here, and we're just gonna clip a little clump off of the hide, and then I'm gonna stack them out real nice again. Whenever you're working with hair, you want to clear out all the under fur so that you have just the stiff fibers to work with. And you want a good healthy clump. It really kind of depends on how big you want your wings to be in the end and how much you need your backing. I always like to use I'll kind of bundle them up all tight together, and then I'll use the hook gape kind of as a measurement just for consistency. So we'll clean out all those fibers, and then we're going to measure this out. So a couple ways you could do it. I always use my hook shank and measure it out twice. You could also, considering that the tail is as long as the hook shank, you can go ahead and measure all the way out. But I tend to measure the hook shank, transfer that measurement, some of those extra fibers, and then find my total length there. So I'm going to transfer that again into my other hand, hold it up to the hook, and figure out where I'm going to clip my extra tag ends here. Kind of measure that. Same distance as where that thread ended. And we can secure it to the hook shank here. And I always like to kind of see where I'm landing before I go too tight. That looks like it's probably going to be good. This is the trickiest part of the fly, is that measurement right there. I want that to spin, because once you get it locked down, you can't go back when you're ready to tie on your wings, post out your wings. So we'll secure all this excess material to the hook shank. This is part of what makes this fly so buoyant, is all of this underneath elk hair fiber. Just make sure it's nice and secure here. About any that you didn't trap. And then make sure they're all pulled up while trying to avoid capturing any of that tail. So we're just going to build a little bit of a thread body on top of that elk hair underneath here. And then we'll add our next material, which in this case is going to be some peacock herl. There we go. So I have 3 or 4 strands of peacock herl here, and we're just going to match them all up. Like so. Clip off our tips, and then tie those in on one side of the hook shank. Make sure that's secured down right where you want it there, and then you can jump your thread up to where you're going to end that material. Again, just about 1/3 of the way back, 2/3 of the way up as you're working forward, and we'll half hitch off right there. So now we're going to take our peacock herl and spin it into a rope this time. So once you get that peacock herl up to where your thread is landed, we're going to capture it out. Just like so, and then we can clip that off. Now we're ready to pull our backing material over. Make sure this is where I want it. Give ourselves a good bit of room to work with for our hackle, our split wing, and then our whip finish at the end. So I got my elk-hair material here. I'm going to pull it straight over the top. Make sure you get all of those fibers. And then what I like to do is kind of push it down on top and just wiggle it around. It helps get them to be not twisted up on each other. Keeps a nice flat back. And from there we can go ahead and capture this material off with a couple wraps. Make sure it's where you want it, and then you can pull it tight to secure it. And then lift it all at the same time and sneak in front of it. And we're going to build just a little ramp here to get that to flare straight up, perpendicular to the hook shank. So you can see how that's starting to stick out. I have some old tying books that they forego the split wing. They leave that just sticking out like that and then do the hackle. But we'll show you how to do the split wing here as well today. So now that we have our thread back behind that wing, we're going to go ahead and split it. So I'm going to figure out, by pushing it back, kind of get all those fibers to flare naturally to the sides that they want to go. And then we can figure out what our middle point is here. Trying as best we can to make them even. And just manually split it. So you can see just with my hands I've started to kind of create that split wing. And what we can do now with our thread, so I can do this so that you can see, is jump in between that. So I'm going to come up and between one time, and then I'm going to pull that other side over, and we're going to go right in between again with the next wrap. So that's your first wrap on your split wings. And then I always like to do one lock wrap to make sure that nothing's going to come undone before I come back up, and I'm going to post out those wings. So I'll come up on this side and we'll do a couple of wraps there. Sure not to lose them. Try that again. 1, 2, and then one wrap to secure. And then we do the same on the far side. So we got 1 and 2 there, and then a locking wrap to secure it all in place. So there is your split wing for this humpy. And I would say those are maybe a little bit long, that wing, but I always err on the long side because I'd rather my wing be longer. If you get to this point it's too short, it just kind of gets hidden in the hackle. So I have my hackle feathers prepped here now. I went ahead and measured them against the hook barb, or the hook gape there, to figure out how long I wanted my barbels to be. And then I stripped off some of the barbels on the end of the feather where I'm going to tie it in. And then you can take these 2 feathers and put the dull sides together so that the shimmery sides are facing out as you wrap it all in on both feathers. Sometimes I don't want to, but we're going to make it happen. So we have our feathers ready to go. They're married nicely. If you strip the barbels off when you have the feathers married, then you can keep them consistent. So it's just a little tip. for tying them in. And then also tying them in together I find to be important because you want them snugged up close when you go to wrap them together, otherwise they'll kind of fall apart from each other sometimes. So we're going to secure that behind the hair wing there, and then in front, and we'll do a little half hitch, just a little ways back behind our hook eye where we're going to end those hackles. So simultaneously we'll do one quick wrap to get things started here, and then a couple behind before we pull our hair wings towards the back and wrap our hackle in front. Just like so. One more wrap here. And then we'll capture that out. So this is why we leave ourselves a little bit of room right behind that hook eye so that we can capture our hackle feather here and still have room for a nice clean whip finish. Get rid of any of those hackle fibers you might have trapped, like I did. Clean up a little head here, and then we'll go ahead and whip finish that. So we'll come in with our whip finish tool and finish her off. You can always add a little bit of glue as well to the head just to keep it nice and secure. Some people also add a little bit of cement to the backing, that elk hair backing that we put in for durability. I find these flies hold up pretty good, fish after fish. It's a great fly if you have some turbulent water and you need to keep a nice dry fly floating real high with all that elk hair in there. It's a super buoyant fly. It also doesn't need to be cured too often because of that. The water doesn't seem to seep into it too much, so you can fish it for a long period of time without having to re-cure it, re-dry it, all that. It's a great attractor imitation for lots of different bugs. You could do it in yellow variations, lots of different colors. This peacock, I think, also imitates a beetle in some situations, time bigger in terrestrials, and most likely a caddisfly is what you're kind of targeting with this guy. So there's your Peacock Humpy with a giant hair wing.